Okay. So, VE Day. Does everybody know what VE Day is? VE Day is Victory in Europe Day. And it is celebrated on the 8th of May. It's the day that we celebrate the end of the Second World War. Interestingly enough, the Russians celebrate Victory Day on the 9th of May. So we couldn't even agree on when the war ended. But it was on the 7th of May, the day before these celebrations, that Winston Churchill made that historic announcement on BBC Radio. And he spoke about the end of hostilities in Europe. He spoke about the end of the war. And he ended with, "Long live the cause of freedom and God save the King." On the 25th of October, 1415, the English defeated the French at the field in Agincourt. And if you're English, you know about this. We're really happy and proud about it. We defeated the French, although we were outnumbered 4-1. And this great victory sealed the kingship for Henry and for the House of Lancashire, of which he was the head member. And the word went forth by heralds and by messengers, God had given victory. Long live King Henry. The Bible is also full of battles. Many battles won and battles lost. And I want to talk to you about one particular day, in a passage in Isaiah, where Isaiah says that a messenger arrives in Jerusalem. And he says that this messenger comes at a time not of great victory for the city, but after the city was destroyed. But the messenger comes in with this announcement. And the prophet Isaiah, and all prophets, by the way, are poets. Every single book of prophecy in Scripture is written in poetic form. So this poet describes the messenger entering the city of Jerusalem, and he says, "How beautiful are the feet of this person." Why? Because the message is beautiful, right? He's probably running barefoot, on gravel. His feet aren't beautiful. They're cut up. They're probably bleeding. But he says, how beautiful are these feet? Why? Because of the message that they bring. And the message that they brought to Jerusalem after it was destroyed, messed up. The messenger comes in and says, God still reigns. The king will be coming to Jerusalem, and he will bring his kingdom. And it's interesting that this message delivered at this moment that you sort of wouldn't expect, a message, an announcement of joy at a time of suffering and difficulty, actually parallels the kind of kingdom that the messenger and the king is going to bring. It's not a normal kingdom. It's not a kingdom that is established by the might of arms or by the sharpness of the swords or by the number of archers standing in the back. This is a kingdom that is upside down. A kingdom where greatness is given to the powerless. A kingdom where love is given to the rejected. A kingdom which is given to children. That is the kingdom that this messenger announces. Now, in the Gospel according to Matthew, Matthew's trying to write to an audience that is very familiar with the Old Testament. And I want to sort of set up the book because we're going to be talking about it for a couple of months. So this book is written so that the Old Testament reading audience can connect to it and find it familiar, which is why it begins with a genealogy. It starts off by saying, hey, look, this is just a continuation of the story from Abraham to David to the Messiah. It also has lots of Old Testament messages. It describes Jesus in many different ways as the son of David. It also spends a lot of time focusing on comparing Jesus and Moses. Because in Deuteronomy chapter 18, at the end of the 5 books of Moses, at the end of the Torah, we're told that this Messiah, this Savior that will save the people of Israel because of all the sins and all the crazy ways they rebel against God all the time. It says, you're going to keep rebelling, but someone's going to come, someone greater than Moses. and him you will follow. And so the book spends its time showing you how Jesus is Moses but greater. But one of the awesome things about the way that the book is structured is that it's structured like the Torah. So there's an introduction to Matthew and there's an end to Matthew, but in the middle, there's 5 sections. Just like the 5 books of Moses. The book of Psalms does the same thing. It demonstrates that it is an authoritative book by being structured into the 5 books of Psalms. And so here we have 5 sections. And in each section, there is a whole bunch of action. And at the end of the action, there is some teaching. Action, teaching, 5 times through the middle of the book to show that this is from the God of Israel, the way that it is structured. Now, the first section, we see Jesus arriving and announcing the kingdom. Just like at the end of the wars, just like at the end of Agincourt, someone comes to announce the kingdom is coming. And in chapter 4, he begins this ministry of going out and proclaiming the kingdom of God. In chapter 5, he gives us the Sermon on the Mount, where again, this upside down kingdom is described, where the mourning are given joy, where the people with emptiness are given provision. And then he feeds people. And then he gives us the Lord's Prayer. He teaches us how to pray. What he's doing is he's living out the role of the messenger. Like the messenger in Isaiah, he's coming and he's saying, the kingdom is coming. The king is returning. And he's trying to excite the people, trying to show them. But at the end of chapter 7, there is a note there by Matthew that all the people started listening to Jesus. Why? Because he spoke as one with authority. He didn't quote other people. If you've ever, like myself, as an Orthodox Jew, studying Judaism, it's all about who you're quoting. Which rabbi are you quoting? Which other person are you quoting? Jesus didn't quote. He didn't compare himself. He spoke as one with authority. He began to let us know that he's not quoting. He's the author. Simon Sinek is an author that's around today. I love listening to him. He does a lot of writing and speaking about leadership. He's a sort of one of these inspirational leadership guys all over YouTube as well. And he talks about, I love his book, Leaders Eat Last. I think that there's a sort of a gospel message there as well. But he talks about this, but one of the things he loves talking about is something he calls the infinite game. What's the infinite game? He says that most businesses and most companies function in a world where they focus on the finite game. As if there's 2 players, like chess, like soccer, like many games, there's 2 different players or 2 different teams, and the goal is to reach something or to beat the other person. And then if I beat the other person, then I've won. And he says the problem is that business and that life isn't a finite game. It's not about beating the other player. But yet people spend so much time wondering, am I number one? Am I better than this one? Am I better than that one? Do people think of me as better than other people? And he's like, that's not the point. He says the infinite player, the person in the infinite game, isn't comparing themselves with others. Doesn't think that there's a moment when you can beat someone else. The infinite player asks himself different questions. He asks himself, am I better than I was 6 months ago? Am I serving the people? Am I fulfilling the purpose that I want to fulfill? Am I providing people with longer lasting, higher quality products? Is that what I'm achieving? Is that where I'm getting? Because it's not about, will I beat the other person? It's about, am I getting better? Am I achieving progress in this infinite game that I'm playing that doesn't end? And he talks about how these companies actually always achieve better than the ones stuck in the finite game because they're trying to do a better job. They're not trying to beat the other person. And I find here Jesus, there at the end of chapter 7, that's what he's doing. That's what they're noticing. He's not out there trying to be the better rabbi. He's not trying to be better than Buddha or better than Zeus, right? he stands there and he talks about himself, as his own authority. I am God. This is what I'm trying to help you all. And he's trying to care for the people that are there. He's the ultimate infinite player. The second section of Matthew, once he's finished that first bit, the second section focuses on Jesus actually applying the things that he said about the kingdom. He actually brings the kingdom to life in front of people in this second section. So from chapter 8. And he does that through miracles. So from the centurion to the leper, from the women to the blind, Jesus heals all of these different people. And I want you to notice how, and this is something I love about Jesus, how his words match up with his actions. He doesn't just say, I care for the downtrodden. He doesn't just say, I care for the rejected. Those are the people that he heals. He goes to the centurion, the Gentile. He goes to the leper who is impure and rejected. He goes to the woman who has a problem with her blood, who also would not be touched by anyone. He goes to the blind, to the people who people in those days assumed that they were cursed. These are the people that he goes to. These are the people that he touches and heals. And I want to show two important lessons from this. The first one is this. He doesn't go to them because the poor are better or holier than rich people or popular people. He doesn't go because they're better by virtue of their poverty or by virtue of the fact that they're rejected. Oh, I should only care for these people because they're better than that. No. He goes to them because God is showing grace and because he's trying to show everyone, the poor and the rich, where riches really come from. He's trying to show them where love actually comes from. Now, there's a YouTube video that Adele and I love, and we sometimes sort of remind each other of it. It's very funny. There's a guy who comes home from work to his little apartment, and he sits down on the sofa, and he has a Coke, and he has something to eat, and he puts it down on the table. And then you see him sort of getting tired, and he falls asleep. And when he wakes up, the Coke has disappeared, and the plate has gone away. And he goes into the laundry area where he's put dirty laundry, and he opens it up. There's no clothes there anymore. And he goes to his cupboard, and there they are, all clean. Then he goes to the kitchen to see if he can find the plate that he made dirty, and it's not there. It's clean and in the cupboard. And so he runs off to his wife, and he says, babe, we live in this amazing house. It's magic. You just put stuff down, and it gets clean. I put my dirty laundry in the basket, and now it's clean in my cupboard. This is awesome. And his wife naturally slaps him to wake him up from this little dream he's in. Now, to believe that all the good things in our life just come from us, to me, to believe that talents, blessings in our life comes from us is like believing that I can put dirty laundry in the basket and it's magically going to do the laundry for me. It's ridiculous. The good things in our life don't come solely from us. Yes, there's hard work. Yes, there's things that we have to do. But to think that, the blessings in our life and the good things and the transformation of our hearts comes from us is like believing that the table does the dishes. There's no way. And you can see it in the reaction that it causes, because for people who believe that the good things in their life come solely from those things, live in this weight, live in this idea that, oh my goodness, it all depends on me. Everything depends on me. And it's why believing in Jesus was so pivotal to my life and so pivotal to the lives of so many people that I've met. Because when I believe in a God that has done everything for me and provides everything for me, I am now free. I don't live under the weight where I'm responsible, where I have to do everything in my life. I don't live under this weight of fear that if I don't do enough, then God won't love me, or people won't respect me, or I won't be cared for, I won't be accepted, I won't be married. We're free from that weight. Why? Because we have received love by grace. God has done everything for us. Now, does that mean that I just sit back and do nothing? Of course not. Now, seeing the grace and seeing the love, I begin to live out a life where I serve more and I actually become the best that I can be, because I'm not weighed down by the pressure, not weighed down by the anxiety. And I'm free to follow him, and I'm free to love him, and I'm free to be thankful instead of afraid that I didn't do enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not pretty enough, or I'm not clever enough. The second thing that I wanted to show you is to answer a question that comes from this. Because you've got to say, okay, well, if Jesus frees these people that are being pushed aside because of their impurity, because they're not good enough or religious enough, isn't it God that wrote the rules in the 5 books of Moses about impurity? Isn't he the one that set these rules up? So why is he coming now to contradict these rules? I mean, didn't he start the problem in the first place? And that's an important question to answer, because it forces you to go back to the Torah and actually look and ask yourself, well, what was God doing in the 5 books of Moses? Why did he give us those rules about impurity and about all of these things? And when we go back, we learn this, that God gave these rules to the people of Israel to instruct them as to how they should be respectful. When you read the 5 books of Moses, you notice that the people of Israel, time and time again, weren't being respectful to God. They weren't treating him as God. And when they did that, he set rules, he set boundaries so that they would learn how to behave and how to relate and how to care. And he did that within the old Middle Eastern society way of understanding by setting laws for purity and laws for sacrifices. But what the people of Israel did, is they took those rules and eventually turned rules into ways of ridiculing others. Instead of taking these rules as things that are supposed to speak to the heart, supposed to change the way that I feel and think, they took those rules and used them as a structure by which to put other people down in order to raise themselves up. Look, I'm better than you because you don't follow the rule and I do. They forgot that rules are about changing the heart. And then you notice that the point of following the rules never was the point in the 5 books of Moses. God actually changes the rules in the 5 books of Moses several times. If you were to go to rules, for example, about sacrifices. In Leviticus, there's a bunch of rules, but then as you go later on, they begin to change. And then you get to Numbers 15, which we read in the parasha this week, and you notice that he actually changed the sacrifice rules again. He added rules for flour and oil and wine. Why? Because the people of Israel did not want to go up. They didn't want to follow because of the spies. And so he said, okay, well, when you do go up, you will add these sacrifices to remember the rebellion and the 40 years you wandered in the desert. God changes the rules because the rules were about reaching people's hearts and changing the way that they think. That's why when Jesus comes, he says, murder isn't about murder. Murder is about hating your heart. And adultery, yes, adultery is awful, but it's about the lust that begins in the heart. He tries to explain to the people of Israel that all of these rules were set up so that your heart can change, so that you can be a different person. It's not so that you can obey all those rules and then tell other people that you're better than they are. And when you realize that these rules were set to bring you closer to God and bring you closer to grace and bring you closer to him who gives you everything, then you realize that the rules are there, that to disrespect somebody else is to completely misunderstand the Torah. To behave like a religious person who thinks they're better than everybody else is to completely misunderstand the point. Because it's about turning your heart towards other people, and it changes you into someone who wants to honor and respect every other human being, no matter what they believe, no matter what they think, no matter how they live. You want to respect and love every other human being because that's what you've received, and that's what all of these rules are there to teach you to do, to care and to love. And so when we look at Jesus doing these miracles in the book of Matthew, in the Gospel according to Matthew, it's not just that he's doing miracles. Look, Jesus is amazing. But it's also who he's doing the miracles for. Why is he healing a centurion? Why is it a leper? Why is it a woman suffering with a blood problem? It's because he's trying to change the world around him, trying to explain to the people that the king is here and the world has to be turned upside down. You have to see it differently in order to see the love and the beauty that you're looking for. And then finally, we come to the text that we read today. Now, Jesus has spoken about the kingdom. He's taught about the kingdom. He's actually brought the kingdom to them in the miracles that he's done. And at the end of chapter 9, he looks out at everybody and he sees them suffering and he sees them lost. And he goes to his disciples and he says, do you think we need to send more people out there? He's trying to woo them, to get them to move. He tells them, you should start praying that God would send laborers out, because he's nudging them, he's pointing them, he's saying, hey guys, think about this. This is something that needs to be done. It can't just be me healing people in villages around. It needs to be more people. This needs to be a movement. In fact, if you pay attention to that second section, chapters 8 through 10, you'll notice that after every 3 healings, he asks somebody to follow him. He begins to foreshadow. So there are 3 healings, and he talks about this with a random person to follow him. Then there's 3 more healings. Then he talks to Matthew, the author of the gospel. Hey, you should follow me. And at the end of the last 3 healings, the 3 of the 3, he then comes to his disciples and says, you should be praying about going out and doing this as well. And then in chapter 10, he calls them together and he sends them out. And it reminds me of another Henry V moment, not the actual battle, but the passage in Shakespeare. And I'm not going to quote St. Crispin's Day to you, although I would love to, because I do love that speech. But it's another speech that Henry gives at a different part of the play. And some of you may know this. It begins like this: once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead. He's calling his army together. He's mustering them. And he starts speaking to them. And he tells them, gather together. And then he says, I want to see fire in your eyes. I want your brow to go low. I want you to grit your teeth. I want you to ready yourself for the battle. And then he sends them into the fight. And the last lines of the speech are, I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit upon this charge. Cry God for Harry, England and St. George. And off they go into the battle. I love it. But I believe Jesus wants to see the same fire in our eyes. I believe that he tells us that you're more than English. You're more than Israeli or African or American. You are created in the image of God. And the disciples were sent out to say the same thing. The king is coming. The king is advancing. But us, brothers and sisters, we are sent with a different message. The king has come. The victory is won. Prepare as he readies his return. That's the message that we are sent out with. It is done. It is won. The world is changed. And I'll end by going back to the beginning, to the Second World War. In the Second World War, there were Germans posted in Svalbard. And if you're not a Scandinavian, you may not know where Svalbard is. It's at the very north of Norway. It's in the Arctic Circle. And there were Germans that were posted there. And no one bothered to tell them that the war was over. And only on September the 4th, 4 months after the war was over, did they eventually surrender to the Norwegian army, who eventually got up there to tell them the war was over. Brothers and sisters, pray that the Lord sends more laborers into the field, There are people in this world that do not know that the King has come. They do not know that the war has been won. And they do not know to prepare for his return. Once more into the breach, dear friends. Once more. Amen.